The sound of that suitcase hitting the floor felt like my heart splitting in half. 1 second I was folding my grandson Malik's church shirt, the next, my son was upstairs packing like a man running from the Lord himself. Every thud of clothes thrown into that bag echoed through the house my late wife and I built with love and sweat. I knew right then this wasn't a trip. This was a betrayal. I climbed those stairs slow, every step heavy with dread, knowing once I reached that room, nothing in this family would ever be the same. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I stood in the doorway watching my son pack like a man possessed. The lamplight caught the sweat on his forehead, his hands moving fast, desperate like he was trying to outrun his own reflection. That suitcase wasn't just filled with clothes, it was filled with everything he didn't have the courage to say. I'd seen that look before, not in him, but in the eyes of students I'd taught back when I was principal at Booker T High, kids about to make the worst mistake of their lives but too proud to stop. You learn to spot guilt before it turns into action. You feel it in the room like static before a storm. Going somewhere, I asked, keeping my tone even the way I used to with boys who came to school smelling like trouble. He didn't look up. Business trip, he muttered. Last minute. That lie was so thin I could see daylight through it. Deshaun worked tech support for a neighborhood computer shop that barely fixed enough laptops to pay rent. There were no business trips, just excuses. His jaw tightened, his eyes darting to his phone every few seconds. He was waiting for someone, or something. When the framed photo of Loretta slipped from the dresser and cracked against the floor, it was like glass shattering straight through me. My wife holding baby Malik, smiling like sunlight itself. The same smile that used to pull this family back together when pride tore us apart. Deshaun didn't even stop to pick it up, just stepped over her face like she was nothing more than a memory he was done with. Son? I said, my voice low. Talk to me. What's really happening here? He froze for half a heartbeat, and when he turned to me, his eyes were flat. Empty. I'm leaving, Pops. I should have done this years ago. That sentence cut through me cleaner than any knife. All the nights Loretta and I spent praying for this boy, all the Sundays we dragged him to church, so he'd remember what it meant to stand on faith, all the sacrifices to keep him steady after his mama passed, it all landed right there in that one cold declaration. You got a grandson in this house, I said quietly. A boy who looks up to you. He's better off with you. Always has been. He zipped that suitcase like a man sealing his sins inside it. The sound echoed down the hallway, sharp and final. You can't just walk out on him. I'm not walking out. I'm letting you do what you've always done, raise him. I stepped closer, my pulse beating in my ears. Whatever this is, we can fix it together. That's what family does. He shook his head and brushed past me, his shoulder hard against mine. There is no family, Pops. Just you and Malik playing house while I pay the bills. Well, now it's on you. His words hit like hail on tin, loud, cold, relentless. I followed him down the stairs, my slippers dragging on the worn carpet runner Loretta picked out years ago. The house smelled like lemon polish and fried chicken from dinner, the kind of smell that usually meant comfort. Tonight it smelled like goodbye. Malik looked up from the dining table where he was working on his math homework. The pencil froze in his hand. His brown eyes, Loretta's eyes, darted between me and his father. He saw the suitcase. He saw the silence hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Going somewhere, Dad? He asked, his voice steady in a way that hurt my chest. Deshaun couldn't even hold his gaze. Just need some time away, buddy. Grandma, Pops will take care of you. For how long? Deshaun's throat moved as he swallowed. Don't know yet. Malik nodded slowly, then looked back down at his notebook. Okay, that was it. No tears, no begging, just that quiet, okay, like the boy had already learned what it means when grown men make promises they don't keep. The door closed behind Deshaun with a soft click. But to me it sounded like the church bell ringing for a funeral. Through the window, I watched him throw his bag into the back seat of that old silver Honda and drive off into the October dark. The taillights faded past the magnolia trees and disappeared. The house was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock and the low hum of the furnace. Malik stared at the door for a long moment, then shut his math book carefully like he was closing a chapter. "He's not coming back, is he?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say he just needed time, that everything would settle, that tomorrow we'd laugh about this. But Malik wasn't a child anymore, not after a night like this. "No, son," I said softly. "I don't think he is." He nodded, once eyes steady. "Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll handle it." Those words. They didn't belong to a child. They belonged to someone who'd seen too much too soon. I sat in my recliner long after he'd gone upstairs. The lamp cast a warm glow across the old Bible on the side table, the one Loretta used to read every night. My hands rested on its worn leather cover, but I couldn't open it. Not yet. I was too angry to pray, too proud to cry. The clock struck midnight. The house creaked the way old houses do when they settle into the night. But then I heard something else, soft, steady clicking from upstairs. Not the rhythm of a game or music. Something more focused, purposeful. I rose quietly and followed the sound down the hallway. Malik's door was half closed, light spilling out from beneath it. I knocked once. "It's late, son. Come in, Grandpa." He was sitting at his desk, fully dressed, surrounded by papers and printouts. His laptop glowed with lines of data numbers scrolling across the screen faster than I could follow. "What are you doing up this late?" "Checking something," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with the kind of determination I used to see in my best students before they solved a problem everyone else gave up on. "I think Dad took more than just his clothes when he left." I frowned. "What do you mean, bank accounts?" "Credit cards. College fund. I've been tracking his online activity for weeks." Something didn't feel right. I stepped closer, trying to make sense of the mess of documents. "How do you even know how to do all this?" He gave a small shrug. "YouTube tutorials, online forums. It's not that hard once you learn how to follow the trail." The boy's fingers moved across the keyboard, fast, confident. He pulled up a bank statement with my name on it. The number on the screen made my knees weak. $12, I whispered. "That's all that's left." He nodded. "He's been draining the accounts for months. Yours, mine, even Mom's old memorial fund." I grabbed the back of his chair to steady myself. Lord have mercy. But Malik wasn't panicking. He wasn't even angry. He looked cold, focused. "He's been working with someone. A woman named Vanessa. She helped him move the money. I have her emails, her work address, everything." My throat went dry. "You hacked your father's account." He looked up at me. I logged in with his password. "He's careless." There was no fear in his voice, no shame, just truth. He clicked another window, revealing a folder labeled Evidence. Dozens of files, bank records, transfers, fake applications. Each one a nail in Deshaun's coffin. "I'm not letting him get away with this," Grandpa Malik said quietly. "He hurt us. He hurt other people too." "What other people?" He turned the screen to me. Dozens of names, elderly clients scammed through fake investment accounts. My own son had turned into a predator. I sank into the chair beside him, staring at the faces on the documents. Old folks who trusted him. People like me. People like Loretta. Malik's voice cut through my thoughts. He thought we were helpless. But he forgot one thing: he raised a fighter, even if he didn't stick around to see it. The glow from the screen lit his face, and in that light he didn't look like a boy anymore. He looked like the man this family had been waiting for. I should have been terrified by what he was capable of, but all I felt was pride and a rising sense that this story wasn't anywhere near over. Because what Malik was planning next was going to change everything. The glass cracked like a gunshot, and my heart followed right after. I bent down the floorboards, cold under my knees, and picked up the photo. Loretta's face smiled back at me through the fracture, still radiant, still soft, even with a split running straight across her eyes. She was holding baby Malik, wrapped in a yellow blanket she had sewn herself the week before he was born. I remembered that day like it was stitched into my soul, the scent of talcum powder, the church choir rehearsing next door, her laughter filling the room like sunlight through stained glass. Back then, Deshawn used to look at her like she was the center of gravity itself. Every night after she passed, he'd press his lips to this frame and whisper, "Good night, Mama." I used to hear it through the thin wall between our rooms. That small ritual was the only proof I had left that there was still tenderness in him. Now, watching him step over it without a flicker of emotion, I realized that tenderness had died long before this night. I ran my thumb across the crack, feeling the tiny edge slice my skin. A bead of blood rose, small but sharp. That pain, real physical, was easier to process than what I felt watching my son pack up and leave everything behind. The lamplight made shadows jump across his face, and for a moment I saw flashes of the boy he used to be, the boy who ran barefoot through summer rain, who couldn't sleep without the sound of Loretta humming gospel tunes from the kitchen. Somewhere along the way, that boy disappeared, and in his place stood a man who looked at me like a stranger, standing in the doorway of his escape route. "Pick that picture up," I said, my voice trembling more from fury than age. "You don't step over your mama in this house." He stopped halfway to the closet, eyes narrowing. "It's just a picture, Pops. Just a picture," I wanted to shout, but the words came out low and hoarse, almost dangerous. "That woman carried you through hell. She's the reason you got a home to walk out of." Deshawn looked at me for a long moment, and then, like he'd rehearsed it, he shrugged. "She's gone. We all gotta move on. Move on." The words echoed in my chest like an insult carved into stone. I stared at him, searching for the man I raised, the man Loretta prayed over, the man who once stood at her grave promising to take care of this family. But all I saw was someone hollowed out by greed and self-pity. "You've already moved on, haven't you?" I said quietly. "Just forgot who helped you stand." He zipped his suitcase with a harsh sound that cut off whatever answer he might have given. I looked around his room, the same one he'd grown up in, the same one Loretta had painted soft blue before he was born. His old Bible sat untouched on the shelf, the one she gave him on his 12th birthday, with his name embossed in gold. There were dusty trophies from high school basketball, old comic books, a cracked record player he'd begged for one Christmas. Every piece of his life built by love and sacrifice now felt like debris scattered after a storm. The house felt colder the longer I stood there. Outside, the autumn wind scraped against the windows, whispering through the magnolia branches. The air smelled of rain, the kind that sinks into the earth and stays. I set the broken photo back on his dresser, glass and all, and turned toward him. "Son, there's still time to fix this. Whatever's chasing you, whatever mess you got yourself into, we can face it together." He didn't even meet my eyes. "There's nothing to fix, Pops. You always think everything can be prayed over or talked through, but this..." He waved a hand around the room like it was already history. "This ain't about family. This is about survival." "Survival?" I said, a bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. "You don't survive by running from blood, Deshawn. You survive by standing on what raised you." He picked up the suitcase, slinging it over his shoulder. "You wouldn't understand." "I understand plenty," I said, stepping closer. "You're ashamed. Whatever you've done, you think if you leave, the mess won't follow you. But it always does. The only difference is you'll be facing it alone." He brushed past me, and for a moment the smell of his cologne, cheap and chemical, clashed with the faint trace of Loretta's lavender that still lingered in the hallway. I heard the old stairs groan under his weight as he went down, and with every creak it felt like another piece of my family breaking loose. By the time I reached the living room, he was standing by the door, staring at the photo wall. Loretta's wedding picture hung in the center. He reached out as if to touch it, but his hand fell before it got there. Maybe for half a second, guilt cracked through that armor of indifference, but then it was gone. He opened the door and cold air swept in, carrying the smell of wet pavement and car exhaust. "Where you going?" I asked again. He hesitated, then said, "Somewhere I can breathe again." Then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and the sound was so soft, so final, that it made the silence feel deafening. I stood there staring at the spot where he'd been, the faint draft brushing my face. That's when I realized I was shaking not from fear, but from something deeper. Rage, maybe, or heartbreak that had turned into something colder. Malik's voice broke through the silence. "Grandpa?" He was standing at the edge of the hallway, wearing his pajama shirt, his eyes wide and solemn. "Go back to bed, son," I said gently, but he didn't move. "Is Dad coming back?" I forced myself to meet his gaze. "No, not tonight." He nodded once, then looked at the door like he was memorizing it. "Okay." When he went upstairs, I sat down on the couch and let the quiet stretch around me. I picked up the Bible from the coffee table, the one Loretta had kept by her side every night. Inside the front cover, her handwriting curved across the page in blue ink. "Elijah, if you ever lose your way, start with forgiveness. The rest will follow." But forgiveness was the one thing I couldn't find in myself tonight. I turned off the lamp, but the darkness didn't feel empty. It felt alive, pulsing with memories. I could almost hear Loretta's laughter from the kitchen, the rustle of her Sunday dress as she moved around humming "His Eye is on the Sparrow." I closed my eyes trying to hold on to that sound, but it slipped away like smoke through my fingers. The clock ticked past midnight, and I thought I heard something upstairs again, the faint rhythmic sound of typing. Malik awake when he should have been sleeping. The sound was soft but deliberate, steady. I leaned back, staring up at the ceiling, wondering what he could possibly be doing at that hour. Then a thought crept in, quiet and unsettling. What if the child Loretta left behind had more of her in him than I ever realized? And what if somewhere in that steady rhythm of keystrokes, the story of this family's redemption or its reckoning was just beginning? He tried to walk past me, suitcase in hand, but I stepped into the doorway, blocking his path. Years of being a school principal had taught me that tone could cut deeper than any yell, and I used that tone now, low and sharp. "Where you headed, son?" He didn't look at me when he said it. "Business trip," he muttered, zipping the bag with a quick motion like he was trying to seal the lie inside. But lies have a smell, thick, metallic, like burnt wires and regret, and this one filled the room until I could barely breathe. "Business trip." I repeated each syllable, dragging. "You expect me to believe that Deshaun finally met my eyes," his jaw tight. "You don't have to believe it. You just have to let me go." Let him go. Those words carried weight heavier than the suitcase in his hand. "Not until you tell me what you're running from," I said. "Because that's what this is, son, running." He gave a short, hollow laugh. "You always think you know everything, Pops. Maybe that's why Mom couldn't stand living with you near the end." The air left the room. I didn't flinch, but it hit like a punch straight to the ribs. He knew what that name meant, what that wound still did to me. I looked at him, this man I'd raised, this boy I'd once carried on my shoulders after Sunday service, and I barely recognized him. His eyes had lost their warmth. Whatever light Loretta used to bring out of him had been replaced by something meaner, colder. I took a slow step forward. "You don't talk about your mother like that." He shrugged, defiant. "You think she was perfect. You think you were. But you're both the reason I'm stuck. All those rules, all that church talk, none of it paid the bills. None of it made me feel like I mattered." "Loretta gave you everything she had," I said, my voice steady. "And I worked 2 jobs to give you the rest. You mattered every day of your life, you just stopped showing up for it." He turned away, hands trembling as he reached for his phone. "You don't get it. I have to do this. Do what I asked. Leave your son. Leave your father. You walk out that door. You don't just disappear. You destroy what's left of this family." He froze for a moment, his back to me, the muscles in his shoulders tense like a man bracing for impact. Then he turned around, his face hard as stone. "I'm leaving, Pops. I should have done this years ago. There it was, the sentence I'd been dreading without knowing it. I'd always imagined the worst thing a father could hear was that his child was sick or hurt. I was wrong. The worst thing is watching him choose to walk away while you're still standing right there. "Does Malik know?" I asked quietly. His expression flickered for a moment, guilt flashing before pride smothered it. "He'll figure it out. He's smart. Smarter than both of us." "He's 13, I said. "He shouldn't have to figure out why his father disappeared." He didn't answer. The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of the floorboards under our feet. Outside, thunder rumbled far off but coming closer. The storm that had been building all evening was finally on its way. "You think this life owes you something," I said. "But life doesn't owe. It tests. And you failed this one." That finally lit a spark in him. "Failed?" He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You think sitting in this old house praying to a God that never shows up is success? You think holding on to memories of Mom is gonna pay the rent or fix what's broken in me? I think running from what's broken just makes you more broken," I said. "You can pack every shirt you own, son, but you can't pack your shame." That stopped him cold. His eyes darkened, his hand tightening on the suitcase handle, until his knuckles went white. For a second I thought he might swing at me. Instead, he took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're better than me, old man. Always have. You hide behind that calm voice, those Bible verses, like you ain't just as scared as the rest of us." "I am scared," I said. "Scared of what you're becoming." He blinked, maybe surprised by the honesty, but instead of softening, he smirked. "Then maybe you should pray harder." He brushed past me, his shoulders slamming into mine. I didn't stop him this time. The sound of the front door opening cut through the thunder. Rain had started to fall, tapping against the porch roof. As he stepped outside, I called after him, my voice low but clear. "You walk out that door tonight, you walk out on more than your family. You walk out on your name, and that's something a man doesn't get back." He didn't turn around. The rain swallowed him whole. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the open door, the storm wind pushing against my chest. The lights flickered once, twice. Malik's footsteps padded softly down the hallway. "Grandpa," he said from the stairs, "go back to bed, son." But I could tell he'd already heard everything. He stood there in his bare feet, face half shadowed by the dim light. "He's gone, isn't he?" "Yes," I said. "He's gone." Malik's gaze drifted to the cracked photo on the end table, the one of Loretta holding him as a baby. The glass caught the lightning and flashed across the room. "Then we'll be okay," he said simply. Something about the certainty in his voice made me shiver. Kids shouldn't talk like that, too calm, too sure. He went back upstairs without another word, and I watched until his light went out. Outside, the rain picked up, washing the street clean. I shut the door and locked it, though I knew locks didn't keep out the kind of trouble my son was running from. The house smelled of wet wood and loss. I poured myself a cup of cold coffee from the pot on the stove and sat by the window, watching the lightning crawl across the sky. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes and lines carved deep from years of trying to do right. Somewhere out there, Deshawn was driving toward something dark, something that had already started to seep into this house. I could feel it the way a man feels pressure drop before a tornado hits. And upstairs, beneath the steady hum of the rain, I thought I heard that faint tapping again, the sound of Malik's fingers on the keyboard. Quick, focused, relentless. Whatever my son had done, whatever he'd unleashed my grandson, was already chasing the truth of it. And I had the strangest feeling that once he found it, none of us would ever be the same again. He said it so casually that it took me a moment to understand what he'd done. "I'm not abandoning my child," he told me, his voice flat, unfeeling. "I'm just leaving him with the one who actually raised him." It was the kind of line you'd expect from a stranger, not your own flesh and blood. I stared at him, every word carving deeper into me until it hit bone. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. I just listened to the sound of rain sliding off the roof and into the gutters, the wind howling against the windows, like it was mourning something too. That one sentence, those few careless words, undid 40 years of my life. I had spent everything I had keeping this family stitched together with a teacher's salary, a church pension, and blind faith. Every Sunday dinner, every prayer over the kitchen table, every second chance I gave that boy, all of it sounded foolish now. I'd always told myself that love was enough, that if I stayed steady, if I carried the weight, my son would see the value in it one day. But standing there watching him reach for the doorknob, I realized I hadn't been a father to him for years. I'd been a placeholder. He turned, meeting my eyes like he was daring me to stop him. "You'll do better with him than I ever could," he said. And for a second his voice wavered just slightly. But it wasn't regret. It was relief. "Deshaun," I said quieter than I meant to, "you can't rewrite this. You don't get to decide who's family and who's not." "I'm not deciding anything," he said. "It's already decided." The rain grew louder, hammering against the porch. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders, shake him until some sense came back into his eyes, but I didn't. The years had taken that strength from me. All I could do was watch him walk away, dragging everything I'd built down that front step with him. When the door closed, the sound was soft but final. The house seemed to inhale and then fall completely silent. I stood there staring at the wooden cross above the mantel, the one Loretta had hung up the day we moved in. Its shadow flickered under the weak lamplight, and for the first time in decades, I wondered if faith had ever been anything more than a story I told myself to keep from falling apart. I walked through the house, slow, careful, my hand brushing the framed pictures on the wall. Family portraits from years ago, Loretta holding Malik as a baby, Deshaun standing beside me in his cap and gown, all smiles and pride. I stopped at that one. The boy in the photo had promise in his eyes, a heart unspoiled by envy or greed. I whispered to the empty hallway, "Where did you go?" The air felt heavier with every step I took. The kitchen smelled faintly of Sunday leftovers, fried chicken, cornbread, a pot of greens still cooling on the stove. But the warmth those smells used to bring had drained away. The space between the walls stretched the house suddenly too big, too hollow. Every clock ticked too loudly. Every light felt too dim. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands were trembling so bad it spilled across the counter. I leaned against the sink, staring out the window into the dark yard. The magnolia tree swayed in the wind, branches clawing against the glass like they wanted in. The old church bell from down the street tolled once, twice, then stopped, leaving only the hum of the rain. When I turned around, Malik was standing by the stairs again, barefoot, silent. I hadn't heard him come down. His eyes were puffy, but he wasn't crying. He just looked older, like the last bit of childhood had been stripped from him in a single night. "You should be in bed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I couldn't sleep. He came closer, his small hand brushing against mine. "Did Dad mean what he said? About you raising me?" I swallowed hard. "He said a lot of things tonight. None of them worth holding on to." "But it's true, isn't it?" he whispered. "You're the one who's been here. You're the one who shows up." The words hit me harder than anything Deshaun had said. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that his father's weakness didn't define him. But I couldn't find the right words. I just nodded and pulled him close. His head fit against my chest the same way his father's used to when he was little, when the world was still soft and forgiving. After he went back upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table, the silence pressing against me like a weight. The house creaked under the storm-old pipes, groaning wind slipping through cracks in the window frame. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a long, lonely sound that faded into nothing. I rubbed my temples and tried to pray, but all that came out was a whisper. "Loretta, I don't know what to do." The thunder answered for her, rolling through the night. I stood and walked to the front door, opening it just enough to let the cool air in. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and through it the streetlights glowed soft and golden. Deshaun's car was gone, but his muddy tire tracks still cut across the driveway leading out to the main road. I followed them with my eyes until they disappeared around the bend. It felt like watching the last thread of something sacred snap in two. I closed the door and locked it, though I knew locks couldn't keep out what he'd left behind. Upstairs, I heard the faint tap of Malik's computer keys again. That same steady rhythm, soft but deliberate. He was still awake, still digging into something. Maybe it was just homework. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, I didn't stop him. I sat back down at the table and looked at the empty chair across from me, Loretta's chair. The cushion was still indented from the last time she'd sat there years ago, humming under her breath while folding napkins for Sunday lunch. I could almost hear her voice again, soft but certain. "You can't save everyone, Elijah. Some have to fall before they learn how to rise." I thought about Deshaun, about the money gone, the lies I hadn't wanted to see, and the way he'd said it, the one who actually raised him. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had raised Malik more than I'd raised my own son. But that didn't make it any less of a wound. The lights flickered once, and I felt a chill crawl through me. Something told me this wasn't over. Whatever Deshaun was running from wasn't just going to disappear into the dark. And now, whether I liked it or not, it was heading straight back toward us. I poured myself another glass of water, though my hands were steadier this time. The clock ticked past 1 in the morning. Upstairs, Malik's typing stopped. Then came the faint sound of a chair sliding back, followed by footsteps pacing. He was on to something, I could feel it. The same instinct that had warned me about his father years ago was warning me again now. I took a deep breath and looked up toward the ceiling, whispering to Loretta like she could still hear me. Whatever's coming, I'll be ready. Because deep down I already knew the truth my son had shattered tonight wasn't the end of this story. It was just the beginning of something much bigger and far more dangerous than either of us could see. He was sitting there at the dining table, pencil still in hand, the glow from the lamp stretching his shadow across the floor. Papers were scattered, the edges curling from where his sweaty palms had rested too long. When Deshaun dragged that suitcase down the stairs, the wheels bumping on each step, Malik didn't flinch. He didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't even look at his father for more than a second. He just sat there, straight back, the way his grandmother used to sit in church, calm, still, quietly unbreakable. Deshaun paused near the bottom, waiting for a reaction, maybe expecting tears or pleading. But Malik didn't give him that. He didn't give him anything. He just said softly, "It's okay, Grandpa. I'll handle this." The words shouldn't have come from a child. They carried weight, like the voice of a man who'd already learned what loss feels like and accepted it. I stood frozen, watching the two of them, father and son, separated by more than the room between them. It was years. It was choices. It was everything I'd failed to fix. Deshaun gave a dry laugh, setting the suitcase down with a dull thud. "You'll handle this. You're 13, Malik. You don't know the first thing about life." Malik looked up, then steady, unfazed. "I know you don't walk out on people you love." That landed like a punch. Deshaun's face flickered for a moment, something breaking through his bravado, maybe shame, maybe anger. But then he straightened and picked up the bag again. "You'll understand when you're older," he said, turning toward the door. Malik turned back to his homework, but I could see his jaw tighten. His pencil snapped in his hand, the tip breaking clean. He didn't say another word, and I didn't either. The door opened, the night air poured in, and then Deshaun was gone. The quiet that followed wasn't peace, it was aftermath. I walked over to the table and sat down across from Malik. He didn't look at me, just brushed the pencil shards aside and reached for another. His fingers were trembling, but his writing stayed steady. "You don't have to be strong right now," I said. "I'm not," he answered, eyes still on the paper. "I'm just done." There was no anger in his voice, no tears hiding behind it, just that steady calm that scared me more than anything. Kids his age should break down when the world falls apart. They should cry, shout, ask why. But Malik was already building something inside him, brick by brick, quiet and deliberate. After a moment I noticed what he was writing. Not schoolwork, not notes. Numbers. Account numbers. I frowned. What's that? He glanced up, his face unreadable. Something I need to check. The boy's focus was sharp, too sharp for his age. His handwriting was tight, clean. My stomach twisted. You shouldn't be worrying about this, I said. That's grown folks' business. Dad made it my business, he said, and kept writing. The rain outside had eased, the thunder fading into a low hum. Somewhere in the distance a train horn wailed long and mournful. Malik pushed his books aside and stood stretching his shoulders. You should rest, Grandpa. It's late. I wanted to insist, to tell him to stop whatever he was planning, but the words caught in my throat. There was something in his tone that reminded me of Loretta, the way she could end an argument without raising her voice just by believing she was right. I watched him walk upstairs, the light from the hallway catching on his face. That calm expression didn't belong to a child. It belonged to someone who had already chosen a path. After he disappeared into his room, I sat alone for a long while. The clock ticked on the wall, each second dragging like the beat of a tired heart. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. I thought about the way Malik had said it. I'll handle this. He'd meant it. The kind of resolve that doesn't come from confidence but from pain. The kind of promise you make when you've got no one left to count on but yourself. I stood and walked upstairs, stopping outside his door. The faint click of keyboard keys carried through the wood, rhythmic, precise. It was the same sound I'd heard the night before, but now it had a different energy, controlled, focused, dangerous. I thought about knocking, about telling him to stop, but something held me back. Loretta's voice again, somewhere deep in memory. Sometimes Elijah. The only way they learn to fight right is by letting them start the fight. I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the rattle of the window, the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I stared at the ceiling, counting breaths, listening for movement. Around 2 a.m, I heard Malik's chair scrape against the floor, then the sound of papers shuffling, then silence. I got up and looked out the window. The rain had stopped completely. The street glistened under the streetlights, and the magnolia tree swayed lightly in the breeze. Somewhere a dog barked, then went quiet again. The world felt suspended, holding its breath. I thought about Deshaun, about where he was right now. Sitting in some parking lot in a motel off the interstate. Maybe already with that woman Malik had mentioned before, the one who'd been whispering in his ear about opportunities. I didn't know, and for the first time I wasn't sure I wanted to. When dawn crept in, painting the walls gray-blue, I found Malik asleep at his desk, his head resting on his folded arms. The laptop screen glowed faintly beside him. I moved closer, careful not to wake him. The screen showed a spreadsheet, transactions, dates, amounts. Money moving where it shouldn't have. I scrolled through it, my pulse quickening. Every number was a piece of the truth I hadn't wanted to face. Deshaun hadn't just left. He'd taken what wasn't his, and Malik knew it. I closed the laptop, gently staring at my grandson. Even in sleep, his face was tense, his brow furrowed. The boy had taken on the burden of fixing something far beyond his years. And the worst part was, I could see he was good at it. When he woke up, the first thing he said was, "I found where it went." His voice was clear, almost too calm. He turned the screen back toward me. He moved the money through a fake company. But he didn't hide it well. I wanted to stop him, to protect him from what was coming next. But deep down, I knew it was too late for that. Malik wasn't waiting for permission. He was already moving, already acting. "You don't have to fix your father's mistakes," I told him quietly. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw Loretta in his eyes again, the same spark, the same stubborn grace. "I'm not fixing his mistakes," he said. "I'm making sure he doesn't hurt anyone else." The morning light spilled through the window, sharp and pale. Outside, the street was still wet, the world too quiet for what I knew was coming. I poured him a cup of water and set it beside the laptop. He didn't thank me. He just kept typing. Something had shifted between us that night. The roles had changed. I wasn't the one protecting him anymore. He was stepping into something bigger than both of us. And as the sun climbed over the rooftops, I realized with a chill that whatever Malik was planning, it wasn't just about getting even. It was about justice. Real justice. The kind that burns clean and takes everything in its path with it. The door clicked shut, soft as a whisper, but it echoed through the house like thunder rolling inside my chest. That sound, the final breath of something dying, hung in the air long after the rain stopped. I didn't move. I just stood there, one hand still on the doorknob, feeling the chill from outside crawl up my arm. The silver sedan's headlights flashed once across the window before fading down the street, swallowed by the dark and the steady sway of the magnolia trees. I watched those branches move, the same ones Loretta planted the year we bought this house, and for the first time they looked like hands waving goodbye. When the hum of the engine disappeared, the silence came alive. It wasn't peaceful silence, it was the kind that hums with ghosts. The clock on the wall started ticking louder than usual, every second dragging slow and deliberate, like time itself had decided to stay behind and watch us grieve. I could feel the stillness pressing against my ears, and I thought if I spoke too loud, the whole place might crack open. The living room felt different now. The shadows had weight. The furniture looked foreign, like it belonged to another family entirely. Loretta's old quilt lay folded on the couch, her scent long gone but the memory still clinging. I walked over and ran my hand along the fabric, tracing the tiny stitches she'd sewn by hand. She'd made it the year Deshaun was born, said it was to keep the warmth in the house when the cold days come. I wondered if she'd known how cold it would really get. I sank into her chair by the window, the one she used to read in when the sun hit just right in the afternoon. Now it sat in shadows. The streetlight outside flickered its light, sliding across the floor in slow pulses. Malik's footsteps came down the stairs, light, careful. He hesitated at the bottom like he wasn't sure if he should interrupt. "He's gone," I said before he could ask. Malik nodded. He stood by the window watching the rain slide down the glass. The boy had his father's jawline, but his grandmother's eyes, steady, patient, older than they had any right to be. "You think he'll come back?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "Not the man who left tonight." He didn't answer. He just looked out of the street where the tire marks glistened under the wet light, then drew a slow breath and whispered something I almost didn't catch. Good. I should have scolded him for that, told him not to speak hate into the air. But I couldn't, because I understood. I understood every ounce of anger in that one word. We sat there for a while, not saying much. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and cold coffee. I could hear the faint rumble of thunder still lingering somewhere far off, like a memory refusing to die down. I thought about calling Deshaun, about saying one last thing, anything, but I knew it would be wasted breath. Some doors once closed don't open again. After a long silence, Malik spoke. "Grandpa, when you fought with Dad before, did you ever think he'd really leave?" "No," I said. "I thought I could fix it with words. That's what I've always believed. That if you talk long enough, listen hard enough, you can pull a man back from the edge." He looked down. Maybe he didn't want to be pulled back. The truth of it hit harder than I expected. I'd spent years believing that every soul could be saved if you just prayed hard enough, loved long enough. But some people aren't lost, they're running. And they don't stop until they hit a wall, even if that wall is the people who love them. The rain started again, soft and steady, tapping against the glass. I closed my eyes, listening to it. When I opened them, Malik had taken the chair across from me. He was holding Loretta's Bible, the one that used to sit on the mantel beside her photo. He opened it to a page marked with a pressed flower, yellow and fragile. "She always read this one," he said. Psalm 46. "God is our refuge and strength." I used to hear her whisper it when she thought I was asleep. I nodded. She whispered it for all of us. Malik traced the words with his finger, then looked up at me. "Do you think God hears people like Dad?" I hesitated. "God hears everyone," I said finally. "The question is whether they listen back." He closed the Bible gently, his expression unreadable. "Then maybe he's done waiting too." I didn't know what to say to that. Outside, a car passed its tires, hissing on the wet road. The sound faded, leaving us in silence again. The old house creaked as if it was settling into the loss. I glanced at the photos on the wall, weddings, birthdays, church picnics, and realized how many faces were missing now. The family I'd built had thinned out like old paper. Only Malik and I were left, the last two names still trying to hold the line. He stood after a while, stretching his eyes, lingering on the door. "I'm going to go check something upstairs." I nodded, though a knot of unease tightened in my chest. He'd said it too calmly, too much like a man preparing for work, not a child going to bed. "Don't stay up too late," I said, but he was already halfway up the stairs. When his door closed, the house sank back into quiet. I listened to the faint creak of the floor above the soft hum of his computer starting up again. That sound, steady, deliberate, became the rhythm of the night. I wanted to believe he was just distracting himself, but something in my gut told me he was doing more. I leaned back in Loretta's chair, staring at the ceiling. The thunder had faded completely, replaced by the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock. The longer I listened, the more I heard something beneath it, like the house itself was breathing alive with memories that refused to rest. I reached for the photo of Loretta on the end table. Her smile looked softer in the dim light, almost alive. "You'd know what to do," I whispered. "You'd know how to reach him, how to reach both of them." The wind brushed against the window, a low, sighing sound that almost felt like an answer. Then faintly from upstairs, Malik's voice broke the stillness. "Got you," he murmured. I froze. The clicking of keys sped up, sharp and precise. I stood, moving toward the staircase, my heart thudding harder with every step. When I reached the top, the glow of his screen spilled into the hallway, blue and cold. I saw him leaning forward, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. He didn't notice me standing there. Whatever he'd found, it wasn't homework. And as I watched him work fast and unshaken, I realized the sound of departure hadn't ended with that closing door. It had only changed direction. My son had left this house, but my grandson was already chasing the trail he'd left behind. And deep down, I knew when Malik caught up to him, the real reckoning would begin. I sat there for what felt like hours, the kitchen clock ticking behind me like it was counting down to something I didn't want to face. The cornbread was still on the table, half-eaten, the edges starting to harden. The collard greens had gone cold, grease congealing at the surface like thin glass. The smell clung to the air, smoky, earthy, familiar. But it mocked me now. It smelled like a family that used to be whole. I looked at the two empty chairs across from me, one for Loretta, one for Deshawn, and I realized neither of them were coming back. I folded my hands out of habit, not conviction. "Lord," I whispered the words scraping out like dry leaves. "Hold my child wherever he's going, and hold me while I stay." It wasn't much of a prayer, but it was all I had left. Faith doesn't vanish in one night. It unravels slowly, thread by thread, until you're holding the last piece between your fingers, afraid to let go because you don't know who you'll be without it. That's where I was sitting in that kitchen, holding the last thread. The house answered with silence. No creak of footsteps, no soft hum of Loretta's singing that used to drift down the hallway when she thought I was asleep. Just the faint buzz of the old refrigerator and the rain easing off outside. I used to love this sound. Rain was peace back then. But tonight it sounded like the world washing away what little I had left. I took a sip of water, but it tasted metallic wrong. The lights flickered again, a dull warning, and for a second I imagined Loretta sitting across from me, her hand reaching for mine like she used to when the power went out. She'd squeeze it once and say, "See, Elijah, the Lord's just testing our patience." But patience had turned into exhaustion. Faith had turned into muscle memory. My eyes wandered to the Bible on the counter, still open to Psalm 46, where Malik had left it earlier. I tried to read the words, but they blurred, swimming in the dim light. "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." I mouthed them silently, but they landed hollow. Maybe the Lord was our refuge once. But what happens when you're the one who opened the door and let trouble in? A floorboard creaked above me. Malik was still awake. The steady rhythm of his typing started again, soft but certain. I should have told him to stop to rest, to be a boy while he still could. But I didn't, because the truth was I needed him to keep going. His focus gave me something to hold on to. It reminded me that maybe, just maybe, all the things Loretta and I taught him about strength weren't wasted. I stared down at my plate and thought about Deshaun, about the nights I stayed up waiting for him when he was a teenager, the calls from the school, the excuses I'd made for him. Every time he fell, I'd picked him up. Every time he lied, I forgave him. I thought that was what fathers were supposed to do, keep forgiving until your child finds their way back. But tonight, I finally understood something Loretta had known long before me. Forgiveness doesn't mean saving someone who doesn't want to be saved. It means not letting them drag you down when they drown. The lamp flickered again, and this time it didn't come back on. The kitchen sank into darkness, soft and heavy. The rain outside turned to a drizzle, the kind that whispers against the window pane. I sat still, listening, letting my eyes adjust to the faint glow from the streetlight outside. In that quiet, the house started speaking again. Every creak and groan carried memories: Loretta laughing over burnt biscuits, Deshaun's first steps on this very floor, Malik learning how to read sitting right where I was now. Those sounds had been life once. Now they were echoes. I got up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The magnolia tree stood tall in the front yard, slick with rain, its leaves catching the light. It had been Loretta's favorite. She used to say it was a tree with memory-strong roots, soft petals. I remember how she'd clip a few blooms and put them in a vase right there on the table every Sunday morning before church. "Reminds the Lord who lives here," she'd joke. Now without her, it just looked like something that kept growing in spite of everything else dying. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. The lines around my mouth were deeper, the bags under my eyes darker. But there was something else there too, a kind of quiet defiance. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I turned back to the table, cleared the plates, rinsed them in the sink. The sound of running water filled the room, almost enough to drown out the soft clicking upstairs. I kept my back to the window, not wanting to see the empty driveway again. The house was too still, too aware. When I shut off the tap, the silence hit like a wave. I dried my hands on a towel and glanced up the stairs. The light under Malik's door was still on. The tapping had stopped. My gut tightened. I called up to him. "You all right, son?" No answer. I climbed the stairs, my knees aching, and stopped outside his door. The air felt charged, tense. I could hear faint noises, paper rustling, something sliding across the desk. I knocked once. He opened the door halfway. His eyes were sharp awake. "Yeah, Grandpa," he said softly. "Just working on something." I tried to smile. "You should sleep. It's late." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't listening. His laptop screen was filled with open files, charts, and what looked like email drafts. Lines of text scrolled fast, too fast for me to catch. "Malik," I said, lowering my voice. "Whatever this is, promise me you'll be careful." He paused, then met my eyes. "I will." There was something in his tone, steady, grown final. It scared me more than his father's anger ever had. I wanted to press to ask what exactly he was doing, but something told me to back off. So I nodded and closed the door behind me. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened again. The typing resumed, slower this time, deliberate. The sound of faith, I thought, stretched thin but not broken. Maybe that's what Loretta had left behind, not just prayers but purpose. The kind that lives in silence, in the clicking of keys, in the steady resolve of a boy determined to make things right. I lay back and stared at the ceiling until the first light of dawn crept across it. The storm had passed, but the air still carried that post-rain tension, the kind that hums before something big happens. Downstairs, the magnolia branches scraped against the window, whispering in the morning wind. And as the house settled into that fragile calm, I knew this wasn't the end of our storm. It was only the eye of it. Because whatever Malik was building up there in the dark, it wasn't over. It was just beginning to breathe. When he said it, I almost didn't catch it. His voice was calm. Too calm, the kind of quiet that makes you sit up and listen. "I need to check our bank accounts," he said, eyes fixed on the laptop screen. For a second I thought I'd misheard him. Then I saw the way his fingers hovered over the keyboard, deliberate and certain, not the restless tapping of a kid who doesn't know what he's doing. I blinked, trying to process it. He was 13. 13, and he'd said it like a man paying bills or planning a lawsuit. "Why would you need to do that?" I asked, my voice cautious, like stepping into a room where you're not sure what waits in the dark. He didn't look up. "Because something's wrong," he said simply. The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. I'd spent most of my life reading people's students hiding trouble behind silence, men in church pretending they weren't about to break. But nothing prepared me for this kind of composure in a boy his age. There was no fear in his tone, no hesitation, just focus. I walked closer, slow, the floor creaking under my weight. His room was lit only by the blue glow of the screen, casting long shadows across the posters on his wall. The rain had stopped outside, but the air still felt heavy, thick with that post-storm quiet. Malik was wearing his old hoodie sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. "You let me handle the money," I said. "That's not for you to worry about." He didn't answer right away. His fingers moved fast across the keys, navigating through pages I didn't recognize. "I'm not worrying," he said at last. "I'm checking." I stepped behind him. On the screen, the online banking portal loaded slow as a heartbeat. He typed in something, numbers, letters, a password, and the page came alive. Rows of transactions appeared, green and red. My stomach dropped. The balance was wrong. Too low. Much too low. "Where did you get that password?" I asked. He didn't flinch. "Dad used the same one for everything. He's not careful." I stared at him, speechless. The boy didn't even blink. He clicked through screens like he'd been doing this for months. "Malik, you can't just look," he interrupted, pointing at the monitor. His voice didn't rise, but the words cut through the room like glass. "He's been pulling money out little by little, not from one account, from all of them." He scrolled down, showing me the pattern. Transfers to names I didn't know, payments to companies I'd never heard of. The dates stretched back weeks, maybe months. My breath caught. "How long have you known about this?" I whispered. He leaned back, eyes on the screen. "Since before he left." That hit harder than the numbers. "You knew I didn't have proof," he said. "Not until tonight." He opened another tab. Email inboxes, message threads, receipts. Every piece of evidence lined up neatly like a prosecutor preparing a case. The more I looked, the more I realized how deep it went. It wasn't just stolen money, it was deceit woven into the fabric of our lives. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Lord have mercy," I muttered. Malik kept working, his voice steady, clinical. He used Grandma's memorial fund too. Set up a fake charity account under her name. The bank didn't even notice. I gripped the back of his chair, my knuckles white. "Stop looking at that," I said. "You shouldn't see this." "I already have," he said quietly. The boy's calm terrified me more than the crime itself. He wasn't reacting like a kid who'd stumbled into something ugly. He was responding like someone who'd expected it, who'd been waiting for the truth to reveal itself. "Your father made mistakes," I said, trying to steady myself, "but we'll let the police handle it." He finally looked up at me. "And what do we tell them, Grandpa?" "That my dad stole from his own family, from his mother's memory, from his son's future." His tone was sharp now, brittle. "No one's coming to fix this. Not the police, not God. It's on us." The words hit like a confession. Not of guilt, but of responsibility. He turned back to the laptop, clicking through another window. His face glowed blue in the light, and for the first time I saw something in him that scared me, a kind of cold purpose I'd only ever seen in men who'd lost too much to walk away. "Malik," I said softly, "you don't have to do this." He didn't answer. His fingers kept moving. Click, type, scroll, each motion smooth practiced. Then suddenly he stopped. His eyes narrowed. "Found it," he whispered. I leaned in. On the screen was a name, Vanessa Grant. The same one I'd seen pop up beside several withdrawals. Next to it, an address in Savannah, Georgia. A business account linked to some kind of consulting firm. Fake, most likely. Malik turned the laptop toward me. "That's who he's with." I stared at the address. My mouth went dry. "How can you be sure?" He clicked on a folder of screenshots. "Because she's been emailing him. Look at this." He opened one of the messages. The subject line read, "We're almost there." The body of the email was short, a mix of numbers and phrases that didn't make sense at first glance. Then I saw it, the total transfer amount, more money than I'd ever had in my life. "They were planning to leave together," Malik said. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My son hadn't just left us. He'd robbed us and disappeared into the night with someone who'd been helping him all along. I sank into the chair beside Malik, my hands trembling. He closed the laptop slowly and looked at me. What do we do now? I didn't have an answer. Every instinct I'd relied on for 68 years was useless. The boy across from me was no longer waiting for guidance. He was waiting for a decision. I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble scrape my palms. "You let me think," I said. "You let me pray on it." But even as I said it, I knew prayer wasn't going to be enough this time. The weight of faith was there, but so was something else, a spark small and dangerous growing in both of us. Malik opened the laptop again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think I can track where they moved the money." "Malik, no," I said too late. The screen lit up brighter. His eyes reflected it hard and unflinching. I stood behind him, the air heavy with the faint scent of rain and the low hum of electricity. Somewhere outside, the magnolia leaves rustled in the wind, whispering against the window pane, and as I watched him work fast, fearless, I realized that this wasn't just a boy trying to uncover the truth. It was something far deeper. It was the moment a child becomes a man, and whatever he was about to find next would change everything we thought we knew about the night his father walked out. The house had finally gone still, the kind of still that comes after a long storm. You can feel it in your bones when the air shifts, heavy quiet, waiting. The lamps were off, the dishes washed, the chairs tucked in. But the house wasn't sleeping. Not really. There was a hum under it all, a heartbeat made of silence and secrets. Upstairs I could hear it again, the faint, deliberate rhythm of computer keys. Tap. Pause. Tap. A sound too steady to be aimless. Something was moving. Something precise and alive, like a spark running through wires, searching for its next connection. I sat at the bottom of the stairs, the wood cool under my hands, listening to my grandson build whatever he was building in that room above me. The glow from the hallway light barely reached the edge of the steps, painting long shadows on the walls. It felt like standing in a church after everyone's gone home, the candles out but the spirit still hanging in the air. Malik's light flickered once through the crack under his door, and I thought about Loretta again. How she used to say faith wasn't supposed to be comfortable. Faith, she'd tell me, is what you hold when the world tries to snatch every last thing from your grip. I hadn't understood it then, not the way I did now. Because tonight, faith felt like standing on a bridge that might not hold. It was the sound of my grandson upstairs, trying to outthink the kind of man I never thought my son could become. It was me sitting in the dark, praying for both of them, and knowing prayer alone wasn't going to be enough. I leaned back, let the creak of the old house settle around me. The air smelled faintly of rain and cold metal, that scent right before a storm rebuilds itself. The magnolia branches brushed against the window outside, soft and rhythmic, like the house itself was keeping time with Malik's typing. Every few seconds I'd hear him mutter something under his breath, a name, a number, a click of approval, when the screen gave him what he wanted. It wasn't the noise of a boy lost in a game. It was the focus of someone hunting truth through a maze, and I knew enough about life to recognize when someone had crossed a line they couldn't step back from. I thought about going up there, telling him to shut it down, to let it go before it swallowed him whole. but I didn't move. Because deep down I understood. When someone takes everything from you, your home, your trust, your name, you don't just let it stand. You don't stay broken. You build. And sometimes you start by listening to the sound of your own heartbeat, disguised as a set of keyboard clicks in the dark. The clock in the living room ticked over to midnight. The heater kicked on low and steady. My reflection in the window looked like someone I used to know, older, harder, but not finished yet. I could still hear Malik working his chair, scraping once, then silence, then the typing again. I wondered if he'd found something new, something that would make the whole house hold its breath again. I rubbed my hands together, the skin rough and dry. Lord, I murmured, half to the quiet, half to whatever was still listening. If you're up there, keep an eye on that boy. And if you're busy, then teach me how to. The floor creaked above me, soft but sharp like footsteps crossing a boundary. I knew then he wasn't just looking anymore, he was planning. That realization sent a chill through me. One part fear, one part pride. I'd spent my life teaching others to fight with dignity, to lead with patience. But Malik wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. He was taking what was broken and reshaping it in real time. I stood the stairs groaning under my weight. The faint light spilling from under his door made a thin stripe across the hall. I walked toward it, stopped just short, and rested my hand against the frame. Behind that door, a boy was becoming something else. Something I couldn't name yet, but could feel in the pit of my stomach. I thought about opening it, about saying something fatherly wise, something that would remind him that no matter how smart or brave he thought he was still a child. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me earlier, calm, certain, with that same unshakable strength Loretta used to carry in her eyes when the world pushed too hard. I lowered my hand and stepped back. Some lessons I thought a man has to learn without witnesses. The refrigerator clicked off downstairs. The house exhaled. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, and the air felt electric, charged with something that hadn't happened yet. I turned toward the window at the end of the hallway. From here I could see the driveway wet and empty under the moonlight. The car tracks were still there, glistening faintly like veins running through the earth. Deshawn's trail. "Wherever you're headed, son," I whispered, "you best hope that boy never catches up to you." Because if he did, I wasn't sure which of them God would need to protect more. I went back downstairs, poured myself the last of the coffee from the pot, and sat by the window. The taste was bitter and cold, but it kept me grounded. The hum of Malik's computer upstairs blended with the ticking of the clock until they became one sound, steady, inevitable. The house was alive again, but not with warmth. With purpose. Somewhere in that room above me, a quiet war was starting. Between betrayal and truth. Between who we were and who we were about to become. I looked straight ahead, past the glass, past my own reflection, like speaking to someone I knew was listening. "Don't go nowhere now," I said under my breath. This story's about what happens when a man's faith, his family, and his future get tested at the same time. Then I leaned forward, the weight of everything pressing down but not breaking me, and added, "Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because family lessons like this one reach far and wide." Upstairs, Malik's keyboard went still. A single click followed, sharp and final. Then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't end things, it announces them. And in that breathless quiet I knew one thing for sure. Whatever had just begun in that room would change everything before the sun came up. There comes a time in every life when faith, family, and truth collide, and what we do in that moment defines who we really are. This story isn't just about betrayal or money, it's about what happens when love is tested by loss and when silence is no longer an option. Elijah's quiet strength reminds us that faith doesn't mean ignoring pain, it means facing it with grace. And Malik shows that wisdom isn't always born from age, but from the courage to confront what's wrong and make it right. For those of us who've lived long enough to see both joy and heartbreak, this story is a reminder that our legacy isn't in what we leave behind. It's in how we respond when everything we built is shaken. Even in the darkest moments, there's always a light that refuses to go out. If this story spoke to something deep inside, you subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from. Because lessons like these about strength, love, and redemption deserve to be shared across every generation.